Yeah, now I'm going to tell a little bit about Betty. I liked about 4 months of being 3 years older than her, so we did do a lot of things together. And I think I mentioned once before one of the first things I could remember was in the side house where she got the buggy and I got the tricycle. Well, her feet wouldn't touch the pedals, so she sat on that uh, tricycle, and I push her around. And I think we got dolls, but I can't remember any. And the four of us girls played with dolls very much. We had them, but I can't ever remember. I still got two upstairs, Dorothy and Marianne, but I can't ever remember us. And we played school and so on when we got a little older. Another thing we done when we were pretty little is that I think Betty probably was maybe three. Before we started school anyway, we'd go down and see Grandma Gatchel, Mother would, and when she'd go in to see Grandma, Betty and I would go up the upstairs, and this Ole that husked Dad's corn, we went up to see him, and he always had candy for us, and we'd stay up there about 15 or 20 minutes. And I know he liked Betty better than he did me because one day he gave her a bright yellow little dress. And where this fella came from, we never knew. He showed up at Grandma's one day and needed a room to rent. And he lived there for years. And and Dad had him work for him quite a bit. But and I think he told Dad one time he had a daughter. But he never ever uh, was seen out down upstairs or anywhere, so we don't know much about him. But to Betty and I, he was, and especially Betty, like I said, he was a pretty nice fellow. Okay, the next thing I remember about Betty, her and Ted were played together an awful lot. One day, I don't know how it happened or what they were doing, but they set the milk house on fire. Now, I don't know whether how they done it, whether Mother had washed that day and there'd been a fire there. And rather than the milk house on fire, I think it was something in the milk house they set on fire. And Mother and Francis were both out in the yard, and Bob and Gina and I were playing ball. Of course, they yelled fire, and we ran up there, but Mother and Francis had it put out right away. Well, of course, Ted got a spanking right away, and Betty got talked to, of course. And the next thing, Mother's family, on her dad's side, had all lived in Kansas at one time, but they'd moved to Oregon. And the uncle, his name was Guy, and him and his wife, and they had three kids. They came uh, by to see Mother. And anyhow, I think they were there one evening and then the next day and left the next day. Anyway, he was always wanting to kiss somebody. And so when he got there, of course, he kissed Mother and Marguerite and Betty, and I stayed out of his way. And every time in the next 2 or 3 days, he'd say, well, let me, yeah, you haven't got your kiss yet. Well, I knew right then I wasn't going to get that kiss. But anyway, they went to town the next day, and he came home, and he had two candy bars. And he told us, he said, he gave Betty her candy bar right away. And he said, and you get your candy bar after you let me kiss you. And I never said a word. But while they were gone to Canarita that day, I asked Betty, I said, how's come you let, you let him hold you so much and call you Lou? Well, this Lou thing, when Betty and I got in an argument, why, I'd call her Betty Lou, which she'd been called when she was little, a baby, but she hated the name Lou, and I'd call her Lou, and she'd call me Vera, and the argument was on. Well, anyway, he was calling, and I told Betty, I said, you're sitting on his lap, and he's calling you Betty Lou. Well, she says, well, I like him. And I said, to me, he's just kissing. What did I call him? Oh, a kissing guy, and of course, Guy was his last name. Well, anyway, when they got ready to leave, why Marguerite and his girls had been riding a pony that Mother's brother gave us when they moved to town, and they tied the pony up. Well, when they got quit riding, I crawled up on the horse because I knew that they were going to leave. Well, he come over and he said, "You're sitting on this horse, now I can kiss you." Well, I slid off at the back of the horse and he took off. So he said, "Well," he said, "I won't kiss you if you'll come and tell us goodbye when we leave." So that was the end of the, the uncle for a while. We did see him when we moved to Oregon, though. The next thing, like I said before, I don't remember Betty going to except this one party, and she went to it. And when she was little, I know she went to the dances unless she stayed with Grandma, because that's where she got the scarlet fever and gave it to me. So like I say, she did go to the dances and so on. I can only remember 2 times that Betty got in real trouble, and this was when she was a little older, and this was the fair again. She was out at the fair in the evening, and folks got ready to go home, and they couldn't find Betty. So I think she was just goofing around with kids and riding the rides and so on. But anyhow, they had trouble finding her. And of course, that's put Dad in not a very good mood. So then he went to where I was. And they said, well, I was with Kenny and we went up to the dance. So he had to go by the dance hall to get out of town. And he said, we can stop and see if she's in there. And Betty saved my life for once. She said, "I saw Kenny's car. They're in there." So they didn't stop to see if I was, which is a good thing because we did go up to the dance, but then had to go back to the fairgrounds. He did to pick up Bill Randall, and so I went along. And if they'd have stopped, I wouldn't have been in there. But they'd have waited. I know they'd have waited. But anyhow, he said, "Well, how's she getting home?" "Well, I think I stayed all night with Eula." And so that was one time that she got in trouble. The other time was after she met Alvin, and I think I might have been married at the time. I don't know. Anyway, they went out to Smoky Garden just to drive around and so on, and Mother had gone to town, and I kind of think it was on a Sunday. But when Mother went to pick up Betty, she wasn't home. And she went to Grandma's, she wasn't there. So she called home and told Dad that she couldn't find Betty, but when she found her, they'd come. Well, Betty and Alvin didn't get back to town till probably kind of late afternoon. And when they went home, what Joanne told me later, she said, when they got in, she said, Dad was walking across the yard and he was carrying a big 2x4. She said, I knew that she was going to get a spanking with that big 2x4. But, of course, she didn't get a spanking. I don't know whether Betty ever got a spanking or not. Got scolded lots of times or thumped, but I can't ever remember her getting a spanking like that. And then the year I was a senior, I said before, Betty was a freshman. And I don't know when she met Alvin, but I imagine, well, I know they were in the same grade in high school, so that's probably she met him at school. But her first boyfriend was a kid named Bill Day, and he'd walk her home after school. Sometimes I'd walk with him, or sometimes it was with Beverly or Wilma Jean or somebody. But he'd always carry her books. And I don't think anybody ever carried my books, but he always carried Betty's books, and she went with him, for quite a while. Okay, the apartment we lived in, it was divided into three, and the first one on the west side, uh, a lady probably in her mid-70s lived there alone, and she was really a busybody, but she was a good friend of Grandma Gatchell's. In the middle section was Betty's and my apartment, and we had a fairly uh, big kitchen and where we spent most of all our time. And we had the little kerosene stove that I'd had cooked on when we were freshmen. Mother brought it to town, and like this, and it had a heating stove in it. But I can't ever remember building a fire there, or I can't ever remember Betty building one. So I don't know what we done. Um, but we had to carry on our own water, and I think there was a little ice box there, and of course the cabinet to keep stuff in, and the dishes and so on. And so on the other end of the house was Irene Dace's brother and his wife, and they had a little girl that we babysit once in a while. But all around this house was a porch, and it started on Mrs. Crawford's side and went clear around, so we didn't have to walk on the ground or anything. We walked on the porch, but there was only the one bathroom there, and that's where we walked around, and that was really inconvenient because Peters would get up real early in the morning because he had to go to work, and so that was no problem. But if Mrs. Crawford got in there first, she'd either take a bath or wash her hair, or I think just stay in there to keep us out. But anyway, Betty and I tried to beat her in there, one of us, and then we'd stay there till the other one come over so we could get ready to go to school before she was ready. She was not a very nice lady. Well, at this time, I told you before about Marguerite and Jay losing their little girl. Well, this was about the second week of school, and Marguerite came down and stayed with us a week. Now, where all three of us slept, I don't know. Betty might have stayed with Grandma at night or something, and Jay would come in the daytime, and then we'd be there in the evening and night. And I think she was there about a week. Well, of course, Mrs. Crawford could hear, or maybe she even saw Jay come in because she looked out the window. And anyway, go down to Grandma she went and told her that there was a man in that at daytime, and she heard him there in the evening sometime. So Mother explained to her there was a brother-in-law and all this type of stuff. Well, that was just the beginning of our problems, because during this year, why, one time we knew one time that well, I guess first she's steam opened our letters, and if there was anything in that letter that we didn't want told or something, of course, the letters that I got were from Kenny, and they had already been inspected and read and out and everything. But anyway, she told Mother that, or told Grandma that this man was there. So after that was explained, well, then the next thing she was doing was steaming on this letter, and she was going down and tell Grandma about that. And one time she told her, she asked her if she knew that I was getting married. And Mother said, well, I'm not going to worry about it too much because the boyfriend's in the middle of the Pacific or somewhere, and they don't even know where he's at. So, and Grandma believed everything this woman told her. And one night she came over, our landlady came over. And I remember I was writing a letter, and Betty, I don't know, she was studying or doing something, and she said, well, it's real quiet in here tonight. Of course, we had no idea where it was leading to. And we said, well, yeah, it usually is. I said, sometimes, we have like Beverly or Wilma Jean or so on, or Bob and his friends that stopped by, or Bob and Jean. So anyhow, she went next door then and talked to the Peters, and she wanted to know if we were disturbing them. And they said, well, no, they didn't have any complaints. And they said sometimes they could hear us, but we could hear them too. But anyhow, she had gone down, and so that was kind of the end of her really causing problems.
I'm gonna sit right down and write myself a letter and make believe it came from you. I'm gonna write words oh so sweet.